We're taught the saying, blood is thicker than water. That family is the strongest relationship we'll ever have. But what does that even mean to a survivor of her own family? The Walking Arsenal. Lady. A quick note, for me to talk about Lady, I have to do some speculating since we never got the manga dedicated to her backstory. But as always, the speculation comes from my background in psychology. Lady's introduction to the series didn't seem like it had much to unpack. It felt pretty straightforward. The most obvious aspects of her character were that she had an intense anger towards demons, and that she was incredibly driven to kill her mark, her father, Arkham, who is the origin of her hatred. A man whose obsession with demons made him sacrifice his own wife in an attempt to become one himself, hoping to transcend his mortality. It seems like a straightforward revenge plot, but understanding the human mind is hardly ever a straightforward task. Although one may expect Lady to not hold any reservations towards her goal, the reality of the situation is that her motivations are more layered than she leads on. Lady's story is scarred by the abuse from her father, and it is the dynamic between these two that reveals how tragic Lady's character truly is. Despite the terrible things he has done, Lady has expressed conflicted feelings over her father, something that is incredibly relatable. But Nimbus, why would she feel so conflicted? Arkham was clearly a power-obsessed manipulator and even tried killing her several times. Why would she cry when finally killing him? Why would she show any remorse like she did when speaking to Nero?
It's true. You'd never recover from that.
That's the thing, my faithful and sexy viewer. I don't believe these feelings come from just blood relation. Anyone can be a meaningful person in your life, and anyone can be an abusive person in your life, regardless of blood relation. It's all about the quality of the relationship that is formed. Therefore, Lady had to have had some elements of a pleasant relationship with Arkham for her to feel conflicted. It's a lot easier to justify hating someone who has been completely terrible to you. But what about someone who at one point was warm and supportive? Now you suddenly feel conflicted. These feelings of anger and hatred are inconsistent with your past positive experiences with the person. This is referred to as cognitive dissonance. The experience of psychological stress when a person holds two or more contradictory beliefs, thoughts, or attitudes. In Lady's case, the contradictory thoughts are the hatred for her father and the positive experiences she may have had with him. I hate him, but he's my father. He killed my mother, but he took care of me. The only way this cognitive dissonance can exist within Lady is if at one point Arkham was an actual father to her. Further proof of Arkham's character being different at one point comes from Kalina Ann. No, not the rocket launcher, the woman it's named after, Lady's mother. Not much is known about her other than the fact that she loved her husband and daughter. It's pretty clear that she loved her daughter since Lady's one-woman crusade against all demonkind is fueled by her mother's death. If it is true that she loved her husband, then I can only speculate that it's because she established a good relationship with Arkham before all shit went to hell, literally. Lady's cognitive dissonance over the hatred for her father and Kalina Ann's love for her husband leads me to believe that Arkham was at the very least a decent father. Or that is what he led them to believe. After all, Arkham is a remorseless manipulator. He purposefully stoked the murderous flames of a sibling rivalry built on trauma to further his own goals. Furthermore, he manipulated what little remained of his daughter's innocence, making her believe that all of his murderous actions were not of his own will, but rather due to being possessed by Virgil. Something that Lady desperately wanted to believe to be true in order to protect the image of her father within her head. So much so that she shed tears for her father after being fed this lie. From what we, the audience, have seen, Arkham is a person who will manipulate people's vulnerabilities and traumatic histories to his benefit. This level of manipulation isn't a habit you just suddenly form out of nowhere thanks to a good old helping of demon juice. Instead, I believe Arkham had this planned out from the very moment he met Kalina Ann. Alright, so this next section of the analysis is all speculation, so feel free to disagree if you do. But it's way too coincidental that his wife just so happened to be a descendant of the priestess Sparta used to seal the demon world away. Arkham had already been a scholar on demonic arts and certainly would have been familiar with the history of Sparta. Sparta used the blood of a priestess and his own to completely seal demons away. Arkham canonically traced the ancestry of that very priestess to figure out that lady was a descendant. Therefore, I believe it's possible that he first traced it to Kalina Ann, thus giving him the motivation to get close to her. Arkham then manipulated Kalina Ann into falling in love with him, made her believe she found someone she can spend the rest of her life with happily. Once he had the marriage and her adoration secured, he was able to focus on the next steps needed for his demonic ascension. He may have not known exactly how her blood would be used at the time, but her ancestral connection to the priestess was enough to keep him invested in the relationship as he furthered his studies. The emotional manipulation kept Kalina close by of her own free will as he continued his studies. Eventually, Arkham sacrificed her when he thought he was ready to perform his ascension ritual, only to end up failing and forever losing the person he needed to see his plan through. Well, at least he had a contingency plan in place. But before he could use her, he needed to prepare himself and ensure that the second try wouldn't be a failure, leading to him going on to use the lives of innocent people for his research and further deepening Lady's hatred for demons. This makes more sense to me than him just getting lucky by marrying the same woman who happened to be the one person in this world he needed for his plan, and then conveniently figuring it out after already making a family with her. Now, why does this bit of speculation even matter? It matters because if Arkham manipulated Kalina Ann into loving him, then he most likely manipulated Lady as well. Maybe not into thinking he's parent of the year, but enough for her to feel conflicted about hating him. Looking past the dark fantasy elements of this story, it is clear as day that Arkham is an abusive parent. Not only is he emotionally manipulative, but also physically abusive, literally brutalizing Lady. And when he's on death's door, he has the audacity to try to justify his abuse and plead for Lady's help, expecting to still hold that control over her. Well, it's clear to us all now just how much of a piece of shit Arkham was, and she finally got to kill him. All should be good, right? Well, not exactly. During the events of Devil May Cry 5, roughly 15 years after killing her father, we get this scene where Lady and Trish try to console Nero after discovering the enemy he's been chasing the whole time was his father. Trish tells him that Nero can't kill his own father, and Lady reacts with,
It's true. You'd never recover from that.
This response from Lady really demonstrates an aspect of her trauma that is common in abuse victims. You see, victims of abuse often take unnecessary ownership of the trauma that they were subjected to. Those who have repeatedly suffered traumatic experiences from family members may come to believe that they deserve it, that they have done something to warrant their parents' anger or neglect. They may think that they are just unlovable as a person, and therefore deserve to be neglected. Or that their parents wouldn't have gotten as mad if they had just listened more carefully. Taking ownership is a way for the child to rationalize the abuse that they're receiving from people who are supposed to be their caretakers. I believe Lady blames herself for being too weak to stop her mother's death, and too vulnerable for being manipulated by her father, resulting in her intense anger towards, well, everything. I know I previously used the word child for someone who is clearly older than your basic kid, but keep in mind that Lady is thought to have been in her late adolescence during the events of Devil May Cry 3, making her mother's death more likely to have been an early traumatic experience. rather than something she faced as an adult. This rationalization of the abuse can persist into adulthood, with the person adopting certain characteristics in response to it. A child who believed the abuse they experienced was because of some inherent flaw within themselves may grow up tolerating poor treatment from other people as an adult for the same reason. Another potential reaction, and one that most resembles Lady's case, is developing an extremely volatile anger. Anger that can direct the person to become violent and defensive towards the abuser, or even to others around them who they might perceive to be against them. Like straight up shooting someone you just met in the head out of frustration. Granted, Dante is a demon, but keep in mind she didn't know until after already shooting him. Homegirl is straight up cold-blooded. Lady has taken an unfair amount of responsibility for the abuse she suffered. Victims of abuse may be marked by an unbearable sense of shame that stems from feeling guilty for the abuse they've experienced. How often do we respond to abuse victims with questions like, "Why didn't you speak up sooner?" Or, "How could you let him or her do that to you?" All these questions do is place blame on the victim for an experience they never asked for nor deserved. I believe Lady asks herself questions like these. How could she have been so foolish to trust her father? How could she have let herself be manipulated and allow her mother to die? I believe this sense of shame and guilt is what truly motivates her to kill Arkham by her own hands. By taking ownership of the abuse, it instills within her a false sense of control over it, that somehow it is up to her to put an end to it all rather than being a helpless victim, when the reality is just that. She was a helpless victim. These feelings are why she fought Dante for standing against her, even if it was to keep her safe. No one else was allowed to kill Arkham, otherwise she wouldn't feel at peace with herself. She had to be the one to do it in order to feel as though she could finally forgive herself for letting the abuse happen, and letting her mother die. If someone else did it, then she'd live the rest of her life with that shame. Lady did get her wish. Arkham, after being cast out of the demon world, laid by Lady's feet, wounded and on the verge of death. Without hesitation, Lady shot her father. No! Again, and again, and again. After realizing her goal, all Lady could do was sit back, laugh, and then cry. The psychologically scarring implications of killing another human being aside, it is a natural response for Lady to break down into tears. He may have been a manipulative and dangerous threat to humanity, but Arkham was the last remnant of her tragic family, and she eliminated him. All that's left is Lady. This entire time she burdened herself with a responsibility that no child should have ever felt. Anger is all she allowed herself to feel. But now, all that remains is the grief and sorrow for the family she once had. Now that it's all over, the only thing she can do is finally break down and cry from what she has endured. Being angry because of the abuse she endured is actually a good first step towards recovery. It shows a recognition of the mistreatment, that you understand you didn't deserve what you experienced. But Lady's anger and sense of shame has led her to believe that the only way she can be at peace with herself is if she resolves the saga of abuse by eliminating her father. She is driven by an inability to forgive him, but at the same time she cannot forgive herself. Her heart screams and demands for her to kill him to atone for letting her mother die, and for letting herself be manipulated. However, Lady is being incredibly unfair to herself. This scenario isn't the same as letting some random person try to take advantage of you. This was a parent, someone who was supposed to be supportive, but instead took advantage of your innocence and betrayed your trust. What Lady needs is a compassionate witness. Someone who can not only validate her feelings, but also help her accept that she isn't responsible for any of the trauma she experienced. Someone who can help her unload the responsibility she's placed on herself, and help her let go of the shame and guilt she feels. This can be incredibly difficult for anyone to do if the traumatized person keeps pushing them away and lashes out violently towards them. Behavior not uncommon in victims of abuse who feel little trust in anyone because of their trauma. But with the right amount of patience, the victim just might find the supportive person they need. These days, Lady doesn't seem as intense as she used to be. She remains a hardened demon hunter, but there's nowhere near the same level of anger she displayed in Devil May Cry 3. This could be from finally not having to hunt down her father, or hell, maybe she's found some sense of closure. Despite it all, we see that Lady still holds on to that grief from what she's done. Her trauma will forever remain a part of her, but it doesn't mean it has to define her whole existence. To understand this, the most important words she needs to hear are, "Lady, it wasn't your fault. None of it ever was."